I'm here today with Kirstyn. Hello, Kirstyn.
Hello there.
Now, we met each other at the Hand in Hand conference in West Bromwich a little while ago. Came to chat to your mum and you as well. So, just give us a bit of an overview because your Alma Autism, some of that people might know, some of them might think that's Latin. What's Latin got to do with autism? So, just give us a bit of an overview about Alma Autism.
Okay, so Alma is the Portuguese word for soul. So essentially, it means the soul of autism. And why I chose that word is because I grew up in Brazil. So I was born in the UK, but my parents went to Brazil as missionaries when I was 9 years old. So I spent from 9 years old to 24 years old out in Brazil. So I say that I grew up in Brazil. Did most of my schooling. I did my university degree, undergrad, out in Brazil. So I speak fluent Portuguese. But then being here in the UK, so obviously, well, it's not obvious, but I am back in the UK. And I was just, yeah, there's a story behind obviously how I started Alma Autism, but it was all about the spiritual and the spiritual needs and yeah, just supporting each person's soul and then specifically autistic people. So that's where the name Alma Autism comes from, where most people will email me and say, "Hi, Alma." So yeah, my name's not Alma, it's Kirstyn, but I go with it.
That's fine. I was a truck driver over 15, 20 years, and I was known as Drive because it was quicker. And I did get to the point not long into my career of truck driving. I had a big registration plate made it with my name on it. And it wasn't for anything else other than that's my name. I'm not called to drive. Yes, I'm a driver, but my name actually is Andy. So I said Andy B on the cab just because I was fed up of being called Drive. It's not my name. Who's called Drive? So it used to wind me up. So my wife put me a registration plate, stuck it in the cab. So that's a little bit of history about where you've come from. Let's just touch on the missionary part in Brazil. So you're 9 years old, you go over to Brazil, you spend the next, what's that, about 10, 12 years or so, roughly in my head, over in Brazil. How did you
Yeah.
find life in Brazil after having lived for 9 years in the UK? I mean, we talk about culture shock of coming to the UK, but what's it like going to somewhere else?
So we didn't speak the language when we went out there. So that I think
Okay.
was the main communication barrier of language. So I have two siblings. I have a twin brother and an older sister. She's 2 years older than us. And we went over, and my parents just put us straight into public school, Portuguese speaking school, and were like, get on with it. That's pretty much my family is let's just dive into these things and learn with other people. And that's how we learned Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese. And so, yeah, as a kid, really, obviously going to school, a big difference is in Brazil, you only go to school for one period of the day. So we went to school only in the morning. So by half 11, 12, we were finishing school, going home. And my parents well, they were responsible for a social project out in Brazil of 400 plus children. So the time that we weren't in school, we were with these kids in this social project. And the social project mainly was helping the children do their homework and then had all the extra curriculum things that you would have in a UK school, let's say music and drama and anything that the kids were interested really. They had all these different groups and they could just participate. So that was during the week. And then it just happened that they came Monday to Friday. Saturdays, my parents were very like open and would say, "Oh, let's go to the park. Oh, who wants to go to the park on Saturday? We're leaving here at 10. Just join us." So we were all together on a Saturday as well. And then automatically, what happened on a Sunday was that everybody just came again on Sunday. So the church grew because then it was the same building. The church grew because we were together all the time. So I grew up with all these kids and just did life with them throughout the whole week. So yeah, they were in the same social project for 10 years. And then they moved to a different project, which was for younger children. And at that time, that's when I went to university. So I was kind of in that same place for most of my time out in Brazil.
But you actually did your degree while still living in Brazil.
Yes, so I did my undergrad. So I studied psychology out in Brazil. In my first year, my parents moved back to the UK. And so I was like, well, I'm staying. So I did my psychology degree in Brazil. And then because my parents had already moved back to the UK when I finished, I there was nothing really tying me to Brazil at that time. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna go back to the UK, see what it's like to live as an adult in the UK because I was 9 when I left. I couldn't remember. And then I found out that there was a master's degree in autism studies here in the UK. So the plan was to do it was a 2-year master's degree to do that and then to decide, shall I go back to Brazil or shall I stay? Well, that was in 2018 and I'm still in the UK.
I mean, it is quite a head slapping reality check, isn't it? You're 9 years old. You're beginning to get good formation memories of your life and all that. Then you go out to Brazil. You come back as an adult, having not really lived through here, growing into adulthood. How did you adapt then from Brazil life? I am British, but I'm not really necessarily feeling all that British now because I'm maybe feeling more Brazilian because that's where I spent the last 10 years. How
Yeah.
did you adjust back to the UK?
I think that coming back, so I was 24 when I came back, and I think I struggled more with that than when I was a 9-year-old going to Brazil. Maybe that's because children are more resilient, um, and just get on with it. But so coming back was quite difficult. I felt like I needed to study English to do my master's degree, even though English is my first language, because I had spoken Portuguese for 14 years, did my degree, did my dissertation, everything out in Brazil in Portuguese. So actually coming back to the UK was more of a culture shock for me at the age of 24. Um, so, which is why I moved to London in a way, because I moved back and I was with my parents in the south. I'm not going to mention the place because that might be not great. Southeast of England, and I just missed Brazil so much. There were a lot of factors in that. It was friendships. Obviously, I didn't have people my own age when I moved back. Like, yeah, mainly friendships and that. And also, I came back in the winter. So I did get a job in a special needs school and it was go to work and then it was so cold everybody, I mean, I'm just generalizing it, everybody just goes home in the winter, right? Where in Brazil you just live life with you. It's not just go to work and come back. You go to work and then you might just stay at work a bit longer. You hang out with your friends, obviously at that age, or even at university. And I say all of this, I'm actually an introvert. So I'm not that extrovert and I'm not I don't like that many social things, but I missed that when I came back. And so I moved to London thinking that I got a job in London. That did bring me to London, but I got on a lot better because then I joined a church that had people my age as well. So all of those factors really did help.
It is hard though, isn't it? You have a way of being, of living, and especially around anything to do with family, it's very much more, I suppose, personal and emotive, I guess, to some extent. So when you've got all that family stuff in Brazil where everyone kind of is in each other's lives and it's never like finished 9 to 5 goodbye separation, which is what we have in the UK. That would have been really hard, even as an introvert or an extrovert. I don't think it matters because it's the culture, right? It's everything around you, not
Yeah.
just how you are, but everything around you and how it interacts with you and vice versa. And that's suddenly gone to British
Yeah.
winter, which I imagine is a different temperature to Brazil. And it's quite a shock in every sort of possible way, isn't it?
Yeah, it was.
So let's just go a little bit back in time further. You're talking about your mum and living in Brazil, talking about obviously missionaries. So there's church Christianity into that. Where did Christianity enter your life in a way that you thought, yes, this is something for me, rather than just something my parents do?
I think that moment would have been during my years at university, because before that, previous to that, my parents had always been my ministers. And so I didn't know any different. My parents, they were ordained when I was 4 years old. They went into training seminary when I was two. They got ordained when I was around 4 years old, and so I'd only ever known them as my ministers, and the way that they minister, and again with the whole difference with Brazil and the culture in Brazil of how church out there was. And then at university, I found myself. So I'd gone to a university that was about 40 minutes away from that social project that I was talking about where I grew up. It was in the next town along. And so I didn't have necessarily a church there. My parents had moved. And then with studies, you're just like, oh, 40 minutes on the bus, which actually was, you can't rely on transport in Brazil. So it wasn't actually, it was 40 minutes if I had a car, but I didn't. So it could have been up to 2 hours. Or if the bus decides to come by, if it doesn't, then you're just still waiting. So that's another thing about Brazil. But I found myself not going so often to that church where I was brought up. And everyone my age, we're all getting on with life and doing other things as well. So during my time at university, actually was more of, I'd say, like a pause of going to church. And that's where I think I came into a better relationship with God, knowing that I can have a relationship with God, just me and him in my dorm room, for example. I struggled obviously at the beginning until I realized that. But then once I accepted that, I think that would have been my moment of right, this is now my personal relationship, how I want to, well, not how I want to shape it, but how God is shaping my journey. And then not feeling guilty that I wasn't actually getting to church every Sunday. And friends helped me with that, like with through conversations and understanding where I was at in that time. And then kind of jumping along from that, so I was, which leads me into the bit about autism. It's all kind of connected. It is connected. I when I finished university and I was already experiencing working with autistic people, I just had this passion and curiosity to know, actually, how does this person that's different to me have a relationship with God? And how can I help these people in their own unique ways? So I kind of took it from, oh, I've got a unique journey and my personal relationship with God, and how can I support others that are different in so many ways have their relationship with God as well? And so I think I matured a lot through that. So I'd say, yeah, my personal journey would have been from my early 20s.
So,
Even though I'd say I've been a Christian all my life, and as I said,
yeah.
I've always believed in God and just grown up, but it's that separation from your parents, like you're saying.
Yeah. So you've grown up in and around churchy stuff, Christianity stuff. So obviously it's going to infuse in you in different ways. We have different reactions to that. So was it at university when that pause happened? Is that when you decided, you know what, Jesus is for me personally? Or was that something you probably maybe earlier decided to do, but it sort of, I suppose it was such a part of everything around you, it wasn't something you had to think of quite so much?
Yeah, exactly that. So I think when I was younger, it was, we just did devotionals together. We did Bible studies together. It was, I don't know if this is the right word to use, but I'm just going to say it's kind of automatic. So, and again, because all your friends, I mean, there was a big group of kids around me at that at the social project. So because everybody did it, we just did that together. We obviously had small groups of study, where we were challenged to think a bit deeper and what does this mean for you. But I think it was, yeah, when all of that's stripped away is when, so for me, when I was at uni and like, oh, church is a bit more distant and I'm not near those friends that I grew up with, you start thinking, okay, what does it actually mean for me?
So university, you're having more, I don't want to use the word enlightened or revelation. It's not necessarily sounds like that. I think for some folk it is. For my wife it was. For me it was just, well, I was in a church and we went there and that's what we did, and it made sense to decide to follow Jesus. But it wasn't such a a reactive thing, whereas my wife was very much not Christian, not a Christian home, and then all of a sudden decided, do you know what, this is important. It was very much, it was like a Paul on the road to Damascus, lights and stuff going on, and we have a very different faith beginning, I suppose you might want to call it. So university happens for you, and you're now thinking, okay, faith, autism, degree, and at some point along that journey, which I know a teeny bit of, you start to link those much more directly. So why did you do psychology, and how did you then move towards autism? What was the, I suppose, the emotional connection between the two?
So I did psychology because one, I didn't really know what to do. But at the social project where I grew up, there was a psychologist, and I used to love her sessions. She would do group sessions with the teenagers. And I think I admired her work, but also seeing the factor of helping people. So, how can I serve? How can I understand people? How can I understand the mind? Um, I don't know what else to do, so let's just go and do this. That's really how I got into doing psychology. And then, because nothing else was really pulling me towards a different field of study. Um, in my fourth year of university, we were encouraged to do placement. So we had to do four different placements in different fields of psychology. And one of those was in the field of education. And and so at this point, I needed it to be a paid placement slash job to pay my rent. And I found this advert that said that this little child, so back then in, so this is like 2012, 2013. So autism wasn't really spoken about in Brazil back then. And there was this advert that said to look after, be a one-to-one with this little girl in her nursery slash preschool, because the years are all different out there. But to be a one-to-one with this little girl, and she was 3 at the time, going on 4. She's nonverbal, incontinent. They didn't mention the challenging behaviors, but it just said that her preschool wouldn't accept her without a one-to-one. So all I naively thought to myself was, how hard could this be? A 3-year-old, right? I love children. Let's just go for it. I learned a lot with that 3-year-old. And because I'd had no training in, let's say, autism. Again, back then, it wasn't really, she wasn't diagnosed as autistic then, just that she had some developmental delays. I had no training in that whatsoever. I think we had, like, throughout my 5-year degree, we had one morning of a seminar that spoke about disabilities. That was literally it. So I just learned on the job, and I just became curious about how. So I would go every day with her. So I did university in the morning and then work with her in the afternoon, taking her to preschool. So this has nothing to do with church, really. It's just going to this education center, and I would see her and say, hang on, she is learning, but she's learning different to her peers. So I'd go home that evening and kind of Google, how can I teach her colors and the alphabet in all these different ways? And it was trial and error, really, what would work for her. So when I finished university and I finished working with her, because I was going to return to the UK, I thought, let me study more about autism. Because by the time I'd finished working with her, that was 2 years that I was with her, they were starting to question whether it was the autism spectrum, and yeah, other things as well. So I came back, started studying autism studies as my master's degree, and I thought, right, I think my research could be about the spiritual needs of autistic people, because, as I said, I'm a Christian, and I just kind of matured in my own spirituality, let's say. So my research was faith, spirituality, and people with autism, or autistic people. And the actual outcome of my research was not how do we support the spiritual needs, but the outcome or the results was we're not even talking about the spiritual needs of autistic people, let alone supporting them. And so that's really what my research was trying to say, like, how, right, okay, so an autistic person, are they even, if they can get to church, are they going? If they can't get to church, how do we meet their needs where they are? So that was that was the end of my studies then, that then kind of was the birth of Alma Autism.
Wow. Uh, Also, throughout what you were just saying, you keep on linking back to your time in Brazil and how
Mhm.
you were sort of baptism of fire, might be the other way of putting it, of, okay, off you go to school, you don't speak the language, you'll pick it up. But of course, as a
Yeah.
child at 9, whatever, you probably do actually pick it up because due to the fact that it's not so entrenched that this is how it must be, therefore, oh, it could be this way, and let's try these words, and all of a sudden you're speaking Portuguese. That we sort of understand that part of it. It makes sense to us, I think, generally, that children can far more quickly absorb new culture, new language, new situations than adults who are like, I miss my British cup of tea, whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
So you've got your degree, you've got this desire. So what is it you actually do as Alma Autism and that then helps people who are struggling with, either they're struggling with autism, or perhaps a church or a group might be thinking, how do we engage with people? We don't know what we're doing. I mean, you just said in Brazil, not that long ago, people didn't even know really what the word autism was. It's not been that used. And in the UK, I would say it's still not that well understood, apart from, oh, it's just an additional need, which is a massive oversimplification of a much deeper, far more involved situation. So where do you begin to help people understand right from the beginning of this? I suppose it's a glossary term. What is autism?
So there's a lot to unpack in what you've just said.
I know, sorry.
That's okay. So first of all, just saying about, so I started by raising awareness of autism, which is a lifelong developmental disability. That is the medical terms for the autism spectrum. And I always say to people so I do training days and that, and I always say, look, I studied psychology for 5 years. I studied autism for 2 years. I've had now over 10 years experience of working with autistic people, and I still do not know fully the autism spectrum because you just keep learning. So I can't tell you in like 2 minutes an answer to that. But yeah, the medical terms, it's a lifelong condition. There's lots of different things in the terminology. So some people will say disability, some people will say condition. I always suggest in my training that you ask, if you meet somebody or a family, just ask their preference, because people take some things very personally because it's about them at the end of the day. So ask people their preference. And yeah, the autism, just something from what you said about struggles. A lot of families that I've spoken to as well, they will say, so autism is their identity, it's who they are, it's neurodiversity, it's how their brain works. The struggles are actually like the co-conditions that come very often with autism. So they might have struggles with anxiety and depression because of some of the difficulties that autism, like the characteristics of autism, let's say one of them will be difficulties with social communication. Because of that, which is part of them, that might cause anxiety. And so what people struggle with are those like co-occurring conditions. Parents often say, oh, we struggle because my child just won't sleep. So it's very common of sleep differences as well. And so the struggles are those things that come alongside autism. So I'd finished my research, the masters, that literally said, okay, we're not even talking about autism. And like you said, even so, I graduated in 2017. And from then, it's a funny story, really. I had surgery on both of my feet at this time. And so I was bedbound with my feet up, but my brain was ticking, right? You've just done this research that has just told you that people don't even know about autism, let alone supporting autistic people. So I was like, what can I do? What can I do? And so while I'm there just recovering from surgery, I was like, right, I need to do something. And I am just one person. So what can I do? So I started writing a blog on the internet, obviously because I was still like homebound at this time. Then I started going to my own church, and like the regional church, saying, what are you doing about this? So one of the first things was they had a family fun weekend with all the regional churches coming together. And so I just sent an email, as you do, and said, this is great what you're doing for families, But what are you doing for families that actually they can't cope with crowded places, they can't cope or manage loud music? You're going to have a bouncy castle. What about the children that can't queue and wait in line? What are you putting in place for these families? And that's how it started, really, with that email of saying, kind of not pointing the finger, but just questioning, right, what are you doing? Because as I said, I'm one person, I can't do everything. So I was started to challenge my own church, and then it kind of grew from there, which went from awareness of just telling people about autism to then, yeah, challenging, right, okay, I'm telling you what autism is. Now, what are you going to do about it? Not what are you going to do about autism, but what are you going to do about how your church supports autistic people? And it's just grown. And especially post COVID, I've got a feeling that people are wanting to know, wanting to, yeah, not just know, but wanting to make changes in their own churches, which is brilliant.
Can't unknow what you know. And if you're saying, questioning, saying, great for families, but what about autism? Actually, it isn't pointing the finger, but you are saying, but now that you know, what are you going to do? Because now you can't unknow the
Exactly.
fact that you are not doing
Yeah.
this. But also, you're not just
Yeah.
saying you're terrible, you're rubbish, look at what you're not doing. Actually, you're there to offer some support clearly now, because
Yeah.
it's a really good biblical thing, not just to say you need to do this, but actually, okay, you're not necessarily thinking about this, but how can I help you in this area? Because you may only be one person, but Jesus was one person. So, it
Yeah.
can go quite far when we talk to the right people and do it in the right way.
Yeah. And the outcome from that first event was they said to me, oh, actually, and it was really good that they were quite vulnerable in saying, actually, we're not doing anything. If we gave you a budget, could you do a sensory room? Or no, I think they called it a quiet room at that time. And I said to them, I can. Yeah, absolutely, I can. But I'm not just going to do a quiet room, uh, a babysitting room. I will do a room that people can go to if they need to, which will be obviously the opposite of what you've got going on. So, yes, it will be a quieter room because you've got loud stuff going on. So, we need that contrast. But within that room, I will offer people the opportunity to engage in the theme of your weekend in a different way. And that's how it became a multisensory room, because it was so in there we had different things that people could engage with, um, using all their different senses in their own way, in their own time. But it was linked with the theme, the story, the Bible verse. We had that in the room that was going on in that for that weekend. So it meant that if they'd have just done a quiet room, then I'd say that was the first step. That's great. You're doing a space that people like, a breakout space if people need it. But what I kind of advocate for now is, which I did back then, but I'm kind of more straight about this now, saying, go the next step, go use every single opportunity that you have to be able to teach the gospel, to be able to talk about Jesus, to tell people that they're loved. So yeah, if you've got a room, then why not use it in that way?
Which is cool, which is why myself and your mother got on very well, because we have some very, very similar ideas, which clearly have been passed down to the next generation and yourself. Because
Yeah, I think
actually, it's not enough just to give a child a colouring sheet and say, go and colour, because all you're doing is maybe meeting a need for about 5 minutes. But as Christians, we don't want children just to be entertained by the church. We want children to meet Jesus Christ, because it's a life transforming, lifelong relationship too. Just getting that point in, because that's where myself and your
yes,
mother got on exceedingly well when we started chatting before we got to talk about what you were doing. Right. So do you give us an
that's
idea? So
true.
you've got this thing, Alma Autism is here, they're doing something. What is it that people might expect you to be bringing or doing that perhaps we wouldn't necessarily have thought to do?
So and this has grown. So I didn't start by using, for example, sensory trays, but with my past experience of working in special educational needs schools, we used to do stories using sensory trays. So the typical story is going on a bear hunt, the three little pigs. We would use a lot of sensory base and do the stories on trays. And I can't really pinpoint when it was, but there was a time when I was like, hang on a minute, what about Bible stories? Okay, so then I did Google it and I was like, I wonder if this is out there. And I didn't find anything that had Bible stories on sensory trays or using sensory props. And so I just started doing that in my own church, and saw that it worked. Now, again, it worked in my church. And so I shared it with friends, and I was like, oh, started putting pictures on my own social media saying, oh, I did this Sunday. The kids absolutely loved it. It benefits every single child, not only those that have special educational needs. Maybe because it was very new at the time. And so some friends started using it, or not using it necessarily like exactly what I was doing, but they started using like the sensory aspect, which helps. Let's say myself when I was a 9-year-old, if we had this in Brazil, it might have helped a lot more as well with communication, because it's free play. You don't need words for it, and so yeah, I started using a lot of sensory, and that's kind of taken off in a whole other level. So my friends and family were like, you need to get this out there. You need to resource people because they need to know that this is a way that works, that you can teach people, again, of all ages. And you might have an adult that has a learning disability. You might have somebody, again, I've put all of these things in books, but even before that, I had a friend who took one of my little sensory kits that I did at Christmas time to her mum, who had dementia at the time. She's passed away now, but she used it with her mum with dementia, and said that it was so, like, she got emotional because she could see her mum interacting with this little set, and knowing that she knew the Christmas story. And so, yeah, that's just to say it works with all people of all ages, of all different conditions, typical neurodiverse. And that's what I'm trying to do, is just resource people to be as creative as possible using all our different senses. Because some people are visual learners, some people are tactile learners. And with a sensory tray, you've got it all there. So you might be helping someone because they're a visual learner, but then you might be helping somebody because, let's say, through dementia, the smell of things that goes straight to your emotional and your memory part of your brain. So it helps them on that side. You might have someone who's nonverbal, so actually you can be showing them playing the story, doing the story with them, without having to use words.
I want to come on, I want to come on some of the resources that you've got, but just explain what a sensory tray is, because I do know, because I've seen them, and I've got some very minor, teeny bit of experience in this area. But just explain a sensory tray as best you can through radio. What is it?
Okay, so a sensory tray it can be any tray. I do workshops on all the different ways you can use different trays for different things. But essentially, it is a tray that has items that so what I try to do is incorporate all our senses. So something that you can, obviously, you're going to see the tray, something you can touch, something you can taste, something you can smell, something that you can hear. So you try and put all these different things on. But I also take it to have the opportunity of having a sensory tray. I work with a lot of children. I also do respite foster care for children with disabilities who put everything in their mouths. So I also make the trays completely taste safe. I used to say edible, and then somebody said to me, are they meant to eat it? So I've changed my terminology for that. And so it's taste safe. If they put it in their mouth, it's fine. So we'll use like colored rice, because again, they're not going to like just scoop up and eat mouthfuls of it. They're just experimenting through like a little baby, for example. And even, like I'm saying, children that have disabilities or learning difficulties and disabilities, they'll be experiencing the world through their mouths, through their taste. And so, yeah, colored rice, colored chickpeas, because chickpeas have a great sound when you like drop them on the tray. And so, one way of using the sensory tray is to start by using the senses, but then in a biblical way, teaching the Bible, is to relate that to the Bible teaching or to their connection with God. So one of the examples that I always say is, I might start by pouring rice or pouring something on the tray, and I'll say to them, can you hear that? And again, it doesn't have to be someone that's going to respond to me. I might not get any feedback. The person might not be able to say, oh, yes, I can hear that. So I'm just introducing it to them. Can you hear the rice? Now, how do we hear from God? And so I always connect it in those things. It might be like you've got lots of Psalms and Proverbs that might use lots of things like taste. I'm thinking of the Psalm with the honey. So you might say, oh, let's taste this honey. Isn't it, is it, so you can, it depends on the ability of the person, whether you're going to ask them questions like, what does it taste of? And then you wait for that response. Or you might just be introducing it like, oh, it's sweet, isn't it? How sweet is Jesus's love for us? And so it's connecting either the Bible story or the teaching of that Bible story with the senses that you've got, the sensory aspects that you're using on the tray. So for those that are watching, they can see this. So this, I don't know how great the image is, but this is an example of a sensory tray, for example. And so here I've got chickpeas, they're golden. And then, so this is the salvation story. I've used chocolate powder for this part, talking about temptation, not saying that chocolate's bad or sinful, but how tempted are we? And that, so if you add a little bit of water or oil to this mixture, actually it becomes a bit like soil, so you can talk about the dirt of sin. And then I use a sensory scarf for the blood of Jesus. So for this one, for example, I'd say wrap the scarf around the cross. How does Jesus wrap his love around us? So it's always connect. It's not just a play, which is great. That again, that would be the first step, to play with the tray. But then the second step would be to connect it with the teaching. And once you've accepted Jesus into your life, he wants us all to have a heart as pure as snow. So I've got that like fake snow there. If it needed to be taste safe, you could use flour, corn flour mixtures of there's different recipes for different things. And for this story, for example, Jesus wants us, now that you've accepted Jesus in your heart and you've got a pure heart, we still need to continue to grow. How do we grow like the plants and the flowers? So then we've got the green rice to represent that. But then we've got the Bible. And so one way that we can grow and is by learning about God through reading our Bible, through praying. And so that's how you would use a sensory tray essentially, using a sensory tray in a biblical way.
I love what you're doing, which we might put under the bracket of an object lesson. And there are some great ones over the years. The Wordless book, I've forgotten who created that hundreds of years ago, which was a book with different colours that was the gospel story. And we've used it in a church service, and it's around this A5 book, and it starts with gold and you work through the colours, and it tells such a story just with a simple book with colours. It's got no words, no pictures. You can't touch it. It's still powerful. And this is like next level for me, object lessons of, okay, it's not just what you can see. Here's something you can touch, you can see, you can smell, and really interact with it, which is awesome. What other resources are you providing for, let's just say, churches that are thinking, okay, we recognise we've got a family who have got a child with autism. That's probably a pretty classic situation. We have no concept what to do. The family arrive very defensively. Yes, they will. We understand that. But what do we do? How do we engage with them? And what resources that you've got that churches can think, oh, we can have this to help us to engage with that family that wants to come but is struggling?
So I do training days. That's for churches, so they can book a private talk. I call them private talks because it will be for their church. So I get to know their church beforehand, and I'll tailor the talk according to their tradition. And some churches have one room, some churches have many rooms. So I'm not going to go to a church that's only got one room and say, oh, you could have a sensory room. They don't have the space, the physical space for that. So I can do training specifically for churches, and as I said, tailor it to them. And then I do open talks, which people from any church can come to. So I will share my experience. I will give loads of different examples of what I've trialed and tested, and people can take away what works best for them. So that's the training days. I do workshops on the sensory trays, teaching people how they can use it as a one-to-one with a child, how they can use it in a group, how you can use it through storytelling or getting each participant, I say participant just so I can generally say people of any age, they can create their own trays. I use a lot of that one with the story of creation and get everybody to create their own tray and then kind of teach through that. So those are like the workshops and the trainings. And then I have the books. So again, I know on the radio you can't see this, but the books, I've done books specifically. So we've got the Easter one with the stories from the Old Testament. So like these are story trays. And then in the books you've got, so let me just go through here. We've got the Old Testament, we've got the Psalms, the New Testament. So there's like 15 stories of each of these in each book. The all-inclusive love of Jesus is stories about who Jesus loved and how he taught us to love. So that's literally everybody. But it's Jesus loved the sinner. Jesus loved his friends. Jesus loved the outcast. So it's those stories in the Bible. And then the Christmas story. And in these books, the first part has a little bit of theory about sensory processing, why use sensory elements in your teaching. And then also you've got pictures of the trays. I'm just going to find an example here. You've got pictures of the trays and then a list of everything you need to make. So the books are a guide on how to make the trays. And then there's also a reflection page. So it gives you ideas, like I said, pour the rice. Now, can you hear it? All those like conversation starters are provided in the books. And at the back of the book, of every book, you've got recipes of the taste safe stuff. So a lot of people will say, oh, that's great, but I don't know how to make colored rice. I don't know how to make foamy water. So you've got the recipes in there as well. And then the other resource that I have are the picture symbols. So these are the same symbols that are used in special schools here in the UK. So if you have a child already, they'll be familiar with them. You can get this software. It's obviously you have to pay for the software. So a church might want to pay for this software. But a lot of churches don't have a massive budget to pay for that. And so I got a license to be able to sell these to sell the symbols, the pictures. So I've created the church ones, which can be used as a communication aid. So people who are nonverbal, pre-verbal, they can use these to request. For example, they might give you this one or point to this one as a request of, oh, I need prayer, I'd like prayer. Or they can be like a routine.
Hands on it in the prayer, which is what we make sense.
Yes.
Simple.
Or they can be more of a lot of autistic people, especially like to know the routine or like routine, like the schedule. So you could put these so first we're going to read the Bible, then we're going to sing a song, and then we're going to pray. There's lots. There's 24 in this pack. So it helps with not only autistic people. You might have a child that's just anxious, or you might have a child that is there for the first time, or a child. I say child again. You can use these with adults. It's just my experiences with children. It just helps them know what to expect and what's going to happen during their time with you. So yeah, it's just resourcing churches really with additional materials that are going to help with lots of different conditions and for all people.
It's a good reason for you to go to YouTube before listening to this right now. There's a podcast version that will be coming out later as well after the radio station show. But if you go to the video, you'll be able to see all the stuff that Kirstyn's been holding up. Actually get to see who she is. But the cards are great. And the card with a prayer, it's two hands together in prayer. It's an obvious praying symbol, but stuff like that's really simple. It doesn't just help people who might have an additional struggle. We all have struggles one way or another, but actually that's one that anybody who can visually process something is going to understand much more simply and from a younger age. But also I would say for older folk, for example, if you've got a service, and having worked in churches full time for a little bit, it's so common that you go into a church, you think, why do they expect me to know we're going to go from this page to that page or this place to that place and come and do this now? And everyone's gone to one side of the church and you're thinking, well, I didn't know, which one do I go to? So even just the basics of navigating through a simple church service, that's the sort of stuff that can really help people to better engage, whether they're young or older, whether they've got any particular sensory needs or not. They're just new in the church building and thinking, why is everybody suddenly going to the front? What's going on here? Actually, little cards that say communion or prayer or Bible. It helps us to reference the word with an action, with something that we can do or not.
Yeah. I always say, I know I look young if you're looking at me, but I am old enough to know that years and years ago in churches, we used to have the hymn numbers, I mean, some churches. And so essentially, this is like that. There were so many people, and you can't say it's just the children that would be looking and say, oh, great, we're on the last hymn, because you knew that was the last number that was up on the board. So or those people that were waiting for their lunch, they knew that that was the last hit, like number whatever was the last hymn. So this is very similar to that. It's just helping people know their schedule, but also just a bit of advice as well for those that are wanting to make any like small changes. So these are all dyslexic friendly font. So again, if you change the font in the PowerPoint, the slides, the music that you're using, it's not only going to help those that are dyslexic, but everybody can read it. But the other way around doesn't work. So by changing the font, making sure, so these, they're not, I know they probably look white on screen, but they're in like a cream off-white, so that you don't have the contrast of the black and the white font. So it's small changes like this that are not harmful for anybody, but on the contrary, they help so many people.
I'm going to have to wrap this up because we're going to have to go into the news shortly. But how do people get hold of you, the resources? And I'm guessing you've got a website with all it there.
Yes, so the website is really easy. It's almaautism.uk. I'm also on social media, so Facebook and Instagram, it's Alma Autism UK. And on there, you'll find more information about myself, more information about the trainings, the books. You can buy the books on the online, on the website. And I'm always happy to answer any, if you want to, there's a contact page on there, but also email. The email is info@almaautism.uk. And you can just email, and as soon as I am able to, I will respond in, because as I said, I'm one person, but I just love to be able to help other people to be able to do it where they're at in their own churches.
Cool. Kirstyn, I was going to call you Alma then. No, Kirstyn, thank you. It's in my head now, almaautism.uk. Thank you for your time. Sensory health is something that we are very clearly passionate about here at Pure Radio, especially my own show. We have a sensory health regular expert every single week because it's something that affects every single one of us, whether we want to think about that or not. It does. And actually being aware of what's going on in our senses, it can be the difference between being able to engage and just walking away and not bothering. So I'm always passionately excited to support anybody who's trying to help people engage in church, whether it's because they're older or it's autism or whatever the particular struggle is. They've never been to a church before. There's always stuff we can do. And like I said, you're only one person. However, that one person's got a resource that anybody can have and share around. And all of a sudden, you've got this massive help. Kirstyn, thank you for your time today. And go and check out almaautism.uk if you want to know more. Kirstyn, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pure Media, the magazine, is hand perfected with some of the finest writers from around the world that we could find. And yes, Andy B too. New editions are released just for you on the first Friday of every month, from our family to your family. Pure Media, the magazine, is available now. Sign up for free at puremediafamily.com/magazine.